Believe it or not, Rabbi Weinblatt is back in the house. He was been a part of this show for ages, actually, a very long time, and I'm glad to see that he's still among the living. And of course, Pastor Gregory Seltz, who got a cackle out of that, is back. Welcome everyone to the broadcast. You know, it fascinates me that in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned earlier this week that rapidly spreading wildfires near Jerusalem could reach the city, but they also basically have much of it under control, though he has declared a national emergency. And let me be clear, this was started by arsonists. They have arrested 18 people as a result of this arsonist attack. And I mean, it's near highways. Firefighters rushed to control these wildfires that have injured so many people and have prompted the military to even deploy troops. And in my conversations with people in Israel, so many countries have responded with aid and resources that have helped them along. Let me welcome my guest. You know, listen, burning is not a new weapon, Rabbi.
That's true.
Doesn't surprise you at all.
No, it's what's been going on right now is just horrendous. First of all, it was Israel's Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day, a day of celebration, a day when families come together. It's preceded, by the way, by Yom HaZikaron, the Memorial Day to the soldiers who died. And so this was a vicious, conscious attempt to deny any kind of recognition of Israel's independence, and the 18 who have been arrested come from the Arab sector. And so those same people who were told want the land are destroying the land.
Yeah.
And people
Chaos.
along with it. Yeah.
You know, and do you think it's going to ever get any better?
As long as they're allowed to continue to preach hatred in the mosques and in the schools and in the school books and on the media, there is no possibility of changing because it's a population being brainwashed. I'm talking about the people in Gaza. I'm talking about people in so many other places where they're taught to hate rather than to live in peace and to have a sense of tolerance.
Well, you know what? A lot of people, you know, it's interesting because it brings me, Dr. Seltz, to what's going on here on American soil. You know, it's one thing for the Trump administration to say that they're going to hold funds from Harvard and other leading universities because of anti-Semitism, because of the hostile environment. But when you, as Harvard University, commission your own report internally by people you trust, and they come back with a scathing report that not only just Jews, Christians, Arabs, everybody feels threatened. Right. Everybody feels they're in a hostile environment. And so you have to step away and say, what is going on these university campuses? Because the kind of people that would go out and try to burn down Jerusalem, many of them are incubated at our universities. They're being indoctrinated. They're being lied to, they're being deceived. They see the Israelis as devils, as the enemy. And at some point, when they leave these institutions, especially when they find themselves spending all this money for degrees that are meaningless and they cannot get a real job, they got to find something that gives meaning to their lives. And what do? They go out and destroy it. So why are we surprised when we foster this right here at our universities?
Yeah, but when you think about what you just said, the foundational thing is our universities now cannot say there are things that are right and wrong. They can't say it. That's by definition now. Everything now is a relative construct because there is no God, there is no right, there is no wrong. And so when you have someone who uses chaos, hate, and violence to accomplish utopia, to accomplish peace, no. And so the problem is, it comes down to us. I mean, we've jettisoned some foundational things in our country, and we assume the chaos won't hit us. When it's in our institutions, we need to man up on these things in such a way. It used to be a search for truth, right? And truth means there's right and there's wrong. And they've actually said, no, there isn't anymore. Well, this is what happens. Actually, I'm not surprised that people seeking the truth are the ones scared in the basement.
You know, here's what shocks me that also goes underreported, is that the hatred of Jews have towards each other now. They're at war with themselves.
It's a different kind of internal. You know, we Jews like to debate, and when we debate intensely, and so there certainly are divisions amongst our people. I wouldn't say that we're at war with ourselves.
I said it.
Okay, you say it, but I would not say it. And what I see here is that people are passionate, people are strong in their opinions.
But what is the truth? Because there are those that support Hamas, they support these terrorists.
Right.
And others, he just talked about the truth. Then where is the truth?
So there is a minority, a fringe minority, who claim to speak on behalf of the Jewish people. Something like Jewish Voices of Peace, which I like to say is about as Jewish as the Olive Garden is an Italian restaurant.
Okay.
So there are those who claim to speak in the name of Jews, but they are not. They're consistently, the Pew Report and elsewhere says that over 85% of the American Jewish community supports Israel. But the problem, Armstrong, is that those few loud voices are the ones that attract all the light and all the media loves them. And the media.
They love them.
And we equivocate then, too. We just say they're both the same weight. They're not.
Not at all. And so, yes, there are different approaches. Take, for example, what's happening right now. You know, does Israel try and defeat Hamas and wipe them out, or does it try and free the hostages? It wants to try and do both.
Right.
But it's difficult. And there's some who say you should do this so that they never are able to launch an attack again. And there are others who say every single life is precious, and you've got to save them. And they both agree, but they also disagree. You know, there was a wonderful story I heard about a demonstration that was going on before, when they had the discussion about the judicial reform. And they had a demonstration, and someone was going to the counter demonstration the next day. So he sent out a WhatsApp message. He says, can I borrow somebody's flag for the opposite demonstration? They said, sure, take my flag. In other words, these guys were on different sides, and yet there is that commonality that exists there as well. So we have to be careful that we're not divided. I don't want our enemies to define my relationship to the Jewish state or Jewish people.
Help me understand this, because I want to go back now to Harvard.
Sure.
Because I read the report. And there's a mentality at Harvard among some professors, faculty, and students that says to Jews, you're privileged. You're more privileged than whites. I don't want to associate with you. And then there's this professor, the student told the story, where she and this other student was to work together. And then the student says, how would I work with somebody who's part of the oppressed? You oppress people, your country oppress people, your skin because you're Jewish. And then the professor, who's supposed to be an adult in the room, steps in. Well, if you feel you're oppressed by the student, you do not have to work with them.
Sure.
Can I speak to that?
I'm gonna get you. Help me understand this craziness.
I think that's
it's absolutely crazy.
You know what? It's trying to, I think, define us as something that we're not. You know, we look at history. Jews have been the ones who've been on the margin. Jews have been the ones who've been denied. You know, that's why we march with blacks, because we understand what that means to be kept off the bus. We understand what it means not to be allowed to have a seat. And yet somehow it's been perverted and distorted. But that's not our history. That's not who we are, and that's not where we align ourselves. What do you want to say?
We got to attack that at its core, though. It's bigger than even the who's the oppressed. Again, these are the secularists who say there's no right and wrong, and yet they've now come up with a moral system called oppressed oppressor. And of course, they're always the ones that are in charge of that. And then they apply it to you, or they apply it to you, or they apply it to me. And no one ever says, wait a minute, you deny that there's any right and wrong in the first place. Why am I listening to you? How about I go back to this moral code called the Ten Commandments, and we'll actually foundationally go here. Notice how they always attack the Ten Commandments. They always attack any other authority that doesn't put them in power, because that's who they are. They're the liberation theologians. They want to be in power, and they use your oppression, whatever that might be, to empower themselves. We got to attack that at a deeper core.
I got something for you. So the Florida Attorney General recently announced the launch of the Office of Parental Rights. I knew you loved this. Which he says, you see he's laughing, he likes them.
It's a good laugh, though.
Which will enable the Attorney General's office to go after institutions which violates parental rights. Now let me tell you, there's such things as denial of access to school records, lack of consent for biometric or personal data collection.
Sure.
Unauthorized health care, counseling or mental health services, interference with educational choices, failure to notify parents of suspected criminal offenses, objectionable instructional or library materials, and much more. Now, the left has been engaging, Pastor, in a long-term effort to brainwash our youth
and to take them away,
and to turn them into radical leftists, anti-God. This is simply a fact. They teach gender ideology and critical race theory in schools. It's why we've seen such a large uptick in this transgenderism. For example, teachers hide student pronouns and counsel them to be transgender, and they have these LGBTQ flags in classes and read pornographic books.
Right.
Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm glad that they set up an office like that governmentally, okay? But I still think it has to come back to the freedom for parents. I mean, we're the ones that actually pay for all of this for our children. We're the ones who are responsible for all this. And here comes this bureaucrat who says, but now I have control of your kids. I think we need to decentralize these things. It's nice that there's a political answer to help out. I think we got to finally decentralize it, give parents the rights that they've always had, which is they have the right to educate their kids. Give them the resources, parental choice. Let them go to whatever school they want. If you want to have a school like that, great. I'm going to take my child to another school. Parental authority is higher than governmental authority. You know, in the scripture, it's God, church, family, and government. Government's last. And so this idea that the school board has more authority than parents to raise the children, but they don't take care of those children afterwards. So again, we've got to find a better system to actually put the parents back in charge and then call parents to actually be parents again.
It is Saturday, May 3rd, the Armstrong and Show. Boy, can you believe it's already May? Yeah. You remember May Day?
Yes.
When you used to wrap around the pole and do the little May Day dance? Most people too.
I remember. I had trouble learning how to skip. So
yeah, the May Day dance. I remember May Day. Okay, but anyhow, we're going to take a break and come back with much more. Don't go away. This is epic. The United States Supreme Court this week seems to be on the verge of taking something that is so transformative that would, for the first time, allow overtly religious schools to be fully funded with our taxpayer dollars. Oklahoma, like 45 other states, has charter schools that allow more flexibility and innovation in education. And Lord knows education is suffering. Lord knows the test scores, math, science, reading is dismal compared to the rest of the world. But under both the federal charter school law and some of the state laws, charter schools are public schools that are funded by the state, closely supervised by the state, and most importantly, what happened this week with the Supreme Court, by law, the schools must be non-sectarian. How big is this?
Huge. It's huge. But people don't seem to understand what the real issue is. We've allowed the conversation to be that government schools should be secular. Well, I don't know in the history of America where schools were parochial for the first 150 years. I have no problem with putting our monies together so that everyone has equal access to a good school. I got no problem with that. But when did it become equal access suddenly means total control of the curriculum? And so all they're doing right now with this kind of ruling is saying, wait a minute, let's make sure everybody has the same amount of money to go to school.
You can't discriminate against religious schools, is what
right.
you're saying. You just
and that's
can't
my
do
point,
it.
because they're part of the same education system that made America what we are. Why are we suddenly saying you can't be a Christian
But
school?
he has a frown on his face.
Yeah.
Why?
No, within,
Wait a minute. Why do you have a frown on your face?
Within the Jewish community, this would be one of the issues where we have a divergence of opinion because of the fact that there are those who recognize that we don't want to necessarily have religion imposed upon, that we don't want religion imposed on people. By the same token, there certainly are plenty of Jewish schools where we would benefit from this opportunity to be able to have access to these kinds of funds. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag for us.
So you think this is going to change the relationship between church and state?
Well, that's one of the concerns. In other words,
tell me, how is it going to change it?
Whether we talk about the separation of church and state, and so while I agree,
which doesn't really exist, by the way.
Well, I would say differentiation is a better word.
Okay, and while I agree with much of the concerns that you've expressed, Pastor, and that you've talked about Armstrong as well, by the same token, I want to make sure that we are not imposing religion. I want to make sure that we have freedom of choice in that regard. I want to make sure that religion has a voice, and that it is in the public stream, and it is taken into consideration.
Let me just nuance my position. I'm with you on those concerns. Okay. Because our government-controlled schools have driven religion out. So I have no problem with the fact that the government, when it gets in charge of this, is going to be a problem. That's why it shouldn't be charter schools, it should be parental choice. Because if they can actually determine what the school teaches, then we got a problem. But if they give the same amount of money to every parent so they can go, well, I'll give you an example. I've done ministry in New York City, LA, and I wanted to bring our schools. We're a parochial, we got 2,200 schools. I couldn't compete in New York. In New York, they paid $30,000 a student, and I mean, most of the people that I was trying to minister to, they could $10,000 a year, maybe $5,000. You can't produce a school that can compete in excellence with that little amount of money. But if everyone had the same amount of money to go what school they wanted to go to, then I can compete with that public school. I can compete with that school, and whoever produces the best student is going to be blessed. And people will come to my school even if they're not Lutheran. Right. So I think if you give competition and give parents the choice, it excludes the government's influence in curriculum. I'm totally with you on government influence in curriculum. They should only care about teaching civics.
Let me tell you something that bothers me.
As far as I'm concerned.
That should bother all of us. Well, it may not bother you,
go ahead.
but it bothers me. The great state of New York City, legislature just squeaked by and passed assisted suicide, that they will allow the government to give money to anyone who feels in their last weeks of life or months they don't want to live, to assist them. Do you know what the pharmaceutical company is going to do with this?
Wow. Yeah.
Do you know how
Can you see the commercial?
This is? Do you see this?
Oh my God! Yeah, no, I hadn't.
Had you followed the story?
No,
it just passed this week.
Well, no. First of all, I wasn't aware of it, and you're right. When you talk about the danger of pharmaceuticals and of other businesses getting involved in this, not to mention where's the moral voice about that?
But that's
what our tradition teaches in the Jewish religion is that life is precious and that we do all that we can. It's sacred and we hold on to it. You know, there's and someone who's dying, the Talmud talks about, it's as if it's a flickering candle, but you can't do anything to put out that candle, and that's what that would be doing. So we have to somehow find that. By the same token, the aspect of this involvement and interference is very disturbing.
But see, that's where I think the schools are the problem, because if we secularize the schools and we have the schools that have an amorality or even an immorality, there's no problem with this. Of course the state's going to do the right thing for everybody. So I actually think we need more parochial schools. I think we need more moral voices, virtuous education. You can have classical education that's virtue-based and things like that. And then let's mix it up in the arena of ideas.
My grandchildren attend Jewish day schools, and it costs a fortune. So in many respects, obviously, we're going to be the beneficiaries, hopefully, of these kinds of opportunities that will be opened up. And because it's a tremendous burden, and we are such a small minority in this country and in the world that we're trying to perpetuate our values there. So don't misunderstand it.
I got to mention.
No, I agree with you.
I got to mention
we're getting priced out of the market.
I can tell that you all are so busy caring for the sick and shut in. There are things that you're missing that's happening in our culture. Let me tell you another story. Savannah College of Art. Jewish students, my friend, at the Savannah College of Arts received an anti-Semitism party invitation on social media. Yes, the handwritten note asked for attendees to bring party supplies, but the requested items were arranged in such a way that it spelled no Jews.
Very, very disturbing. I mean, what we've seen unfortunately, since the Hamas massacre on October 7th in 2020.
I thought that was going to change things, but it didn't.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I called it. I said in my congregation, right after it happened, I said, there will be sympathy from the world, but it will be short-lived. And none of us anticipated this outburst of anti-Semitism, this outburst of the bullying, the intimidating, the marches in the street, you know, where somebody is saying, I am now stepping forward, and everyone repeats like a bunch of robots, I am now stepping forward to prevent this person, because they're Jewish from entering this space. I mean, I've seen that. And something needs to be done about this because of the fact it is out of control. It is out of control, and it is the predominance of hatred, it's the predominance of prejudice, and it wouldn't be tolerated or allowed for any other ethnic group, religious minority in this country.
Why is the spiritual illness in our nation worsening? And do you, and this is the important question before I say goodbye to you, do you actually think it's going to get better?
Well, can I speak to that? You want me to jump in? Okay, you get to a point where, like I said, in the urban work that I've done, I've watched cities completely come unraveled because they've bought into a notion that we can be outside of God, we can be anti-morality, we can be anti-family, but we're still going to have all these blessings. And then you watch it all unravel and come to nothing. At that point, there are spiritual awakenings.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at with a lot of these things. People are starting to see, you mean you had no problem with them doing that to babies? You had no problem with them doing that to women and enjoying it and watching it on TV? Then people are saying, wait a minute, how do we get here? But it's the secularism that's deeper than even the anti-Semitism that we're not talking about a lot. And as I said before the program, this notion that there is a God who's above all this and we're accountable to him is what we share with the Jewish people in Genesis chapter 1. And that's what the secularists are ultimately after. And they hate you for believing it, and they hate even Christians for believing it.
Which is why it says we're all created in the image of God. It's Tselem Elohim. Absolutely. And I just want to answer that last question, if I may. You know, this coming week, I have a group of rabbis who are going to be here in Washington, and we're going to be studying and talking and learning about what's happening, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's Israel, but then we're also going to be meeting with members of Congress. We have about 90 meetings scheduled on the Hill.
You're going to pray for them, right? Because they're part of the problem.
But here's the thing I want to tell you.
We're
going to be accompanied by about 300 Christian pastors and ministers. That's a measure of
prosperity
hope. That's
ministers? Are they preaching prosperity ministry?
Whatever they're teaching, as long as they're preaching Zionism.
No. Well, sometimes they don't want to offend anybody. They don't want to preach right from wrong. They want to be correct because they don't want to lose their money. They don't want to lose their standing. They don't want the hostility. That's part of the problem too,
for
Rabbi.
Sure. But what I'm talking about is that they're standing with the Jewish community, which did not happen 80 years ago in the Holocaust, which did not happen throughout the millennia of history when the Jews were taken into churches and they were burned there. So this is a reversal. I'm answering your question about whether or not there's room for hope and things like that. There are some positive signs out there, absolutely.
Well, you know, since you said that, because I know somebody's watching and they say, Brother Armstrong, is there any good news? Is there anything for those of us that just keep holding on and all we see is leads and bleed? Is there anything good that we can report today?
I'm telling you, God is at work. God is at work to preserve and to save the world. That's the biblical, that's the Christian message. We just got out of Easter. If you can look at Good Friday and when it all looks like everything is completely unraveled, and then Easter Sunday is a completely different message. I know this is particular to my faith, but I'm just telling you, that is our hope. And that's one of the reasons why we go into the middle of the chaos, because there's a God who loves even there.
Tell someone today how they can be a better human being. Because I know we live in the time where what is right will become wrong and what is wrong can be right. But what is it that you can give them?
I think this would be something we would agree upon, and that is to imbue faith in our daily lives, to imbue the ethics, the morality of what we're being, of the Judeo-Christian ethics. And I think that by coming and being a part of faith communities, whether it's Jewish or whether it's Christian, and even if it's believing Muslims who are not extremist and Islamic extremists, they may find faith there as well in common cause. And that's one of the important points, to find, when the point is that not only should we have that faith, but we have to find out how we walk with God, what it is that God demands of us. You know what the prophet Micah said? He said, only to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. That should be a guiding post for everybody.
But
can I give a verse? I got a verse.
But can a person be good and not believe in God?
Well, let me just, I just talked about this. We have this kind of discipleship, this kind of faith walk. We're the yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil people. Why? Because God is with us.
My rod and my staff.
Well, but He is with us.
Truly, so goodness and mercy will follow us.
Will chase us down, is what the Hebrew says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that's why I got hope.
That's why you got hope. Well, in the minute that we have left,
okay,
a word for young people, because they seem so empty, so lost, searching for real meaning and purpose in their life.
Well, that's what I was, came on the program to talk about today, is that young people seem to be turning right now, because they're actually saying, we now see the emptiness that was perpetuated upon us. Now, the question is, where are they going to start searching? That's where you and I come in as pastor and rabbi. It's our job to get the word out, right?
But what if you're not there? And their search, where do they get it from?
Well, that's what I'm saying. There are people in culture whose voices cut through and say, hey, we've been telling you all along that it's God who's the source of your strength. God is the source of your purpose. And they're starting to hear that again for the first time. So my point is we're here, God is here, and you just said it. Surely goodness and mercy will follow us. No, it's actually chase us down. So God is chasing you down. It's not just that you're looking for God, God's looking for you. And that's the good news.
I would add to that, we have to look for points of inspiration. Right. We have to look for the points of cooperation and of brotherhood. And I look to the state of Israel. I look at what has happened since that terrible massacre, how the people have just came back from there, as you know, the resilience and the national anthem of Israel. What's it called? It's Hatikva, the hope. And we have to have that eternal hope, the belief that the world can and will be a better place. And we got to work for it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Listen, I cannot thank you both enough for coming on and giving us a good word, reminding us that there's still hope, there's still light in the world amidst all this darkness. I just have to tell you, it's so good to see my brother, Rabbi Stuart Weinblatt. It's been so long.
Good to see you.
I appreciate the message. Much more on this May 3rd edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. It's Saturday. We'll be back.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion. And that is, there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. intends to shift the way vaccines are tested, a move that the agency said will increase transparency, but that medical experts fear could limit access to vaccines that undermine the public's trust in immunization depending on its implementation. Dr. Leonni is back joining us out of Arizona.
Morning.
It's always good to see you. And our good doctor, Bryan Donohue, out of Pittsburgh is joining us. Dr. Leonni, what are your thoughts on this potential change, which is outlined in the statement, which says that all new vaccines now will be required to undergo placebo testing, a procedure, I might add, in which some people receive the vaccine and others receive an inert substance such as a saline shot before the results are compared? Dr. Leonni, your thoughts?
Well, I saw just in the media in the last few days, right, some controversy about that. I'm no expert on vaccines, but I think we need to change things, how research is done on vaccines as well. You may have heard the story reported that the famous HPV vaccines that's given, to millions of women around the world, including kids, didn't have a placebo comparison, but they actually put mercury in the placebo arm of that study. And that is something that I don't know anybody really knew about until just very recently. So the way the research is done in terms of, how you do the comparisons and what constitutes a placebo needs to be readdressed, in my opinion.
Well, Dr. Donohue, how could this new placebo testing requirement impact the speed and safety of vaccine development?
Good afternoon, Armstrong, and thank you for including me in this conversation. The change has to have a purpose, a stated outcome. Sometimes vaccines, as we all lived through in the recent past, are made in the context of an urgent and unprecedented threat, in this case, the COVID vaccine. There's been a lot of discussion now under Secretary Kennedy's leadership about vaccines in general, and the bag is kind of a mixed bag. Not everything in life that we do as physicians has to go through a prospective randomized trial. So it is the case that we've been relooking at some of these vaccines. For example, you've heard the mixed messages about the measles vaccine. And in fact, it's been around since my childhood, which is long ago. And I'm not sure that that what's really not at play here, Armstrong, is a deeper underlying suspicion about vaccines across the board. I've not been impressed that the current administration is, in a strict sense, following the science. There appears to be something of an ideological drift afoot under Secretary Kennedy's leadership.
Dr. Leonni, are you concerned about compromising public access to life-saving immunizations? What are the safeguards that are needed, and how do we balance that?
I'm not sure that I would have that concern at this time. If anything, it feels like that vaccines are widely available. I have 5 little kids. I know that every time I go to the pediatrician, we get updates what new is out there and what is recommended. And I've declined certain vaccines, certainly not the ones that have been given to kids for a long time, like Dr. Donohue just pointed out. In terms of adults, as a neurologist, I have to say that I do recommend, the vaccines in terms of shingles, and those kind of things. But again, these are vaccines that have been around for quite a while. And with that, I agree with Dr. Donohue. I think we need to be very careful to, to review the science and not be sort of taken by this ideological drive that a lot of scientists have a concern about, that's come, with obviously a lot of fresh breath, so to speak, and trying to change things. But I think that doing things very quickly or too quickly is always the risk that the pendulum swings into the negative or the unsafe side.
What are the issues that are driving you these days, Dr. Leonni, that we should be concerned about and addressing and discussing?
I am practicing medicine for the last 12 years outside of training, so a little longer than that. So probably a very small amount of time compared to Dr. Donohue. I'm curious to hear about his experiences. But I will tell you, when I was done training in DC 2010, 2011, I had no idea that we would be just in a short decade in the place where we are, where all this mistrust has built up in patients, where media, in a way, is somewhat to blame for a lot of inaccurate reporting. And I think that's why we're seeing the backlash. I think that, again, the pendulum has swung too much in the other direction. And I think those of us who have a solid understanding of science, and by that I mean science, not scientism per se, because that can be used as a philosophy or worldview, if you will. I think those of us need to step up and share our thoughts and make sure that we are heard, be it in our professional circles or be it in the media. So again, thank you for this opportunity for hosting me today.
And Dr. Donohue, how do you respond?
So I think Dr. Leonni opened the conversation on exactly the right tone. I'll tell you this, that when I first started practicing medicine, if you had a heart attack, your likelihood to survive the event intact was about 40%. In our hands now, in large university settings, your likelihood to leave the hospital entirely intact is vastly improved, and the aggregate mortality is reduced to 0.7 to 1.4%. So that's a huge forward step over just the 40 years of my practice. You know, and that all came about through people who were just committed to one thing, being better servants of the patients, not having this sense as to betting on this or that horse, but rather being more innocent advocates of how we can best serve. So there has been a drift, and Dr. Leonni pointed this out. Let me just embellish the point a little bit. So once we become anything other than just innocent advocates, the process becomes contaminated, and we have seen that. All of us remember the desk pounding during COVID, and it would be perfectly fine to say, we don't know. That humility, that honesty, that candor will bring us a greater degree of connectedness to our patients. This has been a gradual decline in our statesmanship over the recent decades, accelerating now over the recent past. So we find ourselves in these conundrums where what things that we know, drinking water is good for your thirst, having your child vaccinated against measles, those are all just simply things that shouldn't be on the table for discussion, but they are because we have lost the power and momentum of our voice.
Does it concern you, the rise in the measles, and they're talking about things that we had when we were kids and vaccinated for, like the chicken pox, and now you have all these new things that are lurking. Does this concern you, Dr. Leonni? And the other thing is, too, it seems as though that the world should be prepared when you consider the fact that this is something that we faced before.
Mm-hmm. That's true, but we're not prepared, correct? And that's a really sad state of affairs, if you ask me. I'm not sure exactly how we got to this point, but you know, COVID was horrible in many, many ways. But I hope that it also gives us the opportunity to kind of sort out, you know, what is real and what you do not question in science, meaning in terms of past experiences, and what deserves really, really, really good doubt. So again, I'll go back to my kids. I mean, there are certain things in terms of vaccines that I would never skip in terms of letting them have those vaccines that have been used for probably almost a century now. Mm-hmm. But these things that have come along in the more recent past have not been tried for a very long period of time. There's all kinds of questions that we should be asking in terms of how the studies were done and who was compared to what and who got what. And again, I mean, there is a point also that needs to be addressed by the current administration and many other folks in terms of, what is the main, or has been the main drive for that? I mean, is it okay for, former CEOs of big pharma to be sitting on the board of the FDA approvals and other, very important agencies and power positions that actually have the regulatory power on these things? I think that many of those have skewed views of what facts are, in fact, and there's different motivation at stake.
Wow. Dr. Donohue, when we come back after the break, I do want you to address the tension between clinical science and patients' personal, I think I'm out of time. Well, let me just have you quickly to address the tension between science and patients and the personal or spiritual beliefs when it comes to this treatment.
So in a word, it's a kind of made-up conflict. So that is to say that traditional medicine depends on the kinds of things that Dr. Leonni and I have been talking about, randomized clinical trials. On the other hand, the richness of our inner life, the structure and nature of our beliefs and our desires, those things really count. Dr. Leonni made the point just a minute ago that she shepherds her 5 children carefully. She makes wise choices, I'm sure, as a consequence of both her love and devotion to these children and her understanding of science. So really, this is not a red hat, blue hat moment. There's room here in caring for patients to allow for their personal sovereignty, their belief in things, even in my end of things, doing bypass surgery on patients who are Seventh-day Adventists and really don't want blood products. So those facts are outlined to them, what hazards we incur, and off we go. So I think it's important that we put our arms around the totality of our patients and not see them as odd ducks or outliers. Many patients chose not to get the COVID vaccine in the midst of the epidemic, and God bless them. The problem we have is the word force. Forcing people to do something is not in the lexicon of good physicians.
Dr. Donohue, always a pleasure to see you. We appreciate your wisdom, your continued contribution to medicine and health. Dr. Leonni is going to stay with us, and we'll be back. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Shaye Mandle is the executive director of the digital health tech AdvaMed, and we also have a professional relationship with AdvaMed, and Dr. Leonni is still joining us. Let me ask you this question, Shaye. How is artificial intelligence currently being used to enhance diagnostic accuracy and treatment planning in healthcare?
Well, Armstrong, first of all, thanks for having me. Great question. And AI is everywhere in healthcare. When we think about diagnostics, think about things like imaging, MRIs, AI being able to pull data from millions of images and be able to target and highlight those places where there may be issues in diagnostics. In therapy, we're talking about things like continuous glucose monitors and insulin pumps that are automatically delivering insulin. AI is involved in diagnostics. It's involved in the healthcare setting. So we know one of the big issues is physician and clinician burnout. AI is currently supporting them. So when you go into your doctor's office, for example, you may be asked, is it okay if we use AI to record our session? And so AI is taking the medical notes for physicians so that they don't have to do that and go back and can spend more time with the patients and actually decrease the amount of time that patients are in the office.
But don't you also think, as this administration tries to protect things like smartphones and other things from tariffs and taxes, we should also protect patients who have to pay high prices for medical advices and things that they need in surgeries and laboratories that has a significant impact on their bottom line?
Unequivocally. And, you know, one of the great things about digital health is it really does have the opportunity to lower overall health costs. So while the device themselves, right, appreciate the administration making sure that we have access to these technologies, and we can talk a little more about that. But you know, I think the biggest key here is personalized medicine leads to more efficient healthcare, which leads to lower costs. And so it's a tremendous opportunity with an aging population. Medicare beneficiaries will be increasing by about 25% over the next 10 years. And so if we're really thinking about improving care, but also lowering the overall cost of healthcare, digital health, and in particular, the use of AI is really key.
You know, I'm going to stick with you for one more. Let me just, what are some of the most promising wearable health technologies in development right now, and how are they changing patient monitoring?
So there's tons of work in this area. And as you know, some of it is consumer focused, some of it is medical grade focused. So, you know, most of us have a smartwatch or a smartphone or a smart ring. And all of those are really important for patients and health consumers to be able to track their own health, to be able to see when there might be changes and when they might need to go to the doctor. On the medical grade side, we're seeing technologies like one of our companies has a nano cloth that is very easy to wear and allows for physicians to be able to see things like lung capacity, blood pressure, heart rate. We also see things, I mentioned, continuous glucose monitor. So there is both a consumer version as well as specifically for diabetic patients version. You wear a patch on your arm, it's continually monitoring your glucose levels. You can see it on your smartphone. And then when connected with an automatic insulin dispersing pump, a diabetic can receive their insulin. So you've removed pinpricks on your finger, you've removed syringes. And so these are the types of things that we're seeing in the marketplace that are really having an impact on the way patients live their lives, the way physicians are able to track and develop more personalized treatments, and we're also seeing costs go down.
Dr. Leonni, how has all this wearable technology changed the way you engage with your patients, and how has this enhanced the field of care?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. I've been an advocate of this technology for the last 30 years since I had the opportunity to develop telemedicine around the world. And this had not been much talked about, you know, until COVID, and then telehealth and so forth came to fruition. And as we were forced to actually integrate these technologies, even though they existed before. So, you know, when it comes to artificial intelligence type of solutions, I have to tell you that as a clinician, in a way, it's made my life so much simpler. It's so much easier to get continuous data sent to me directly, and it's summarized for me and so forth. But at the same time, you know, in a way, it's made my life somewhat harder as well. And artificial intelligence, when it comes right down to it, hopefully people know that that's, you know, technology that demonstrates cognitive functions that are associated with what our human minds can do. And that's anything from learning to problem solving, adaptation, you know, decision making even. And we all can do that, and now machines can do it. But when it comes to a patient-doctor relationship, AI cannot do that. And I think when you have a lot of these tools at your fingertips, you have to, as a clinician, or at least mindful clinicians, the good ones, pay much more attention. And thank God we have more time to pay more attention to develop these more quality types of, doctor-patient relationships, because that trust, believe it or not, if I put my neuroscience hat on for a second, that basically gets neurochemicals in the brain released that helps the patient understand what is happening with them, and into that you can build the deeper understanding and the spirituality in it, which incredibly increases the outcomes. And if you want me to, I'll quote you my examples from the recent Alzheimer's treatment.
Shaye, how are regulatory agencies like the FDA adapting to the rapid rise of digital health tools and AI-driven devices?
The FDA is doing a really good job. So, a few years ago, the Center for Digital Health was set up at the FDA, and recently, in the past year, FDA's authority around what we call a predetermined change control plan was put in place. And this allows the FDA in submissions to take a look at how algorithms will be changing over time and create flexibility for that to happen without having to come back to the FDA every single time there's a software change in order to be approved again. So what we've seen with the FDA, if you look at their performance, especially on AI, we've been satisfied and happy with the work that FDA has been doing. I think we all recognize going forward, it's important to have a very strong FDA with the capabilities to be able to evaluate these technologies. And so we're supportive of FDA continuing to be that sole arbiter of what is safe and effective. So we have some issues with some of the things you've heard about, third-party assurance labs and issues like that. But the FDA, we think they're doing a good job. We think they have the authority and the capabilities to regulate these technologies as they continue to advance. And we'll continue to have that partnership of bringing technologies to the FDA and hopefully working with them to continue to keep these technologies on the forefront and in the hands of patients.
Dr. Leonni, we have about a minute left. You have the last word.
Well, I am so excited that we finally have all this at our fingertips. I mean, it's very, very, very refreshing to see. I deal mainly with the older population in neurology who come in and tell me about their smart watches and how they track their blood pressures or sleep apneas and so forth. So I think that creates more excitement, for monitoring, to give us the data to really treat people better. Again, I think that in this whole new world of digital health, we cannot forget about faith, and we cannot forget about spirituality and what an incredibly important component of healing that is. And I don't think that AI or any other such technology can actually do that.
Well, listen, I cannot thank you and Shaye Mandle enough for joining us. I look forward to having more future conversations about this. Let me also thank our earlier guests for joining us. This is the Armstrong Williams Show. Enjoy what remains of your weekend, and thank you for joining us here at W.W.E 24/7.
Thank you so much.